My name is Emma Collins. I'm 32, and I never thought a ring could end a 5-year relationship. But here we are. I'm still processing what happened last night, so forgive me if this feels scattered. Some moments are still replaying in my head like they're refusing to settle. I met Daniel 5 years ago at a mutual friend's house party. Nothing fancy, cheap beer, bad music. We ended up on the back porch talking about travel photography and why small towns always feel more honest than big cities. He laughed easily back then. A real laugh, the kind that pulls you in. We used to take spontaneous weekend trips. No planning, no itinerary, just a full tank of gas and curiosity. One night, we drove 3 hours just to watch a meteor shower. We forgot chairs, forgot real food, survived on gas station snacks, and a single blanket. Daniel lay next to me, pointing out constellations he'd memorized as a kid. I remember thinking, this is it. This is my person. Somewhere in the last 2 years, something shifted. Instagram became a job, then a personality, then a religion. He started calling himself a lifestyle creator. He only had about 3,000 followers, but you'd think he was managing a brand empire. Every dinner turned into a photo shoot. Every moment had to be content-worthy. His friends changed too. Tiffany, Madison, the brunch brigade. They lived for expensive mimosas and engagement ring comparisons. Everything was measured. Clarity, carats, cost, status. 6 months ago, we went to Madison's engagement party. Her ring was massive, 3-carat solitaire, the kind that sparkles aggressively under restaurant lighting. The women spent the entire night examining it like jewelers in a lab. When our friend Lena arrived with a modest vintage ring passed down from her grandmother, the energy shifted instantly. "Oh, that's unique," Madison said, smiling without warmth. Tiffany whispered something about budget rings, not quietly enough. Daniel didn't defend her. He leaned closer to Madison instead, asking about the jeweler's website. Lena left early. I found her crying in the parking lot. That was the night I knew I had to be careful. I'm a project coordinator. I make decent money, but I don't come from wealth. I wasn't going to buy a ring to impress strangers. And honestly, I remembered the man Daniel used to be. The one who loved antique shops, who said diamonds were boring, who liked stones with personality. So I spent a year saving, $10,000, every spare cent. I found Clara, an artisan jeweler about an hour outside the city. We designed a custom ring around a deep blue sapphire, Daniel's actual favorite color, before Instagram decided everything had to be white. The setting was white gold, with tiny diamonds arranged in a constellation pattern. Ursa Major. The meteor shower night. The ring was perfect. Last night, I took him back to that hiking spot. Sunset, quiet. I got down on one knee and told him I wanted a life with him, not a brand partnership. He opened the box, and his face fell. "It's not a diamond. It's a sapphire," I said softly. "Like you used to love." He cut me off. "This looks cheap." The word cheap landed like a slap. I told him how much I spent. He winced, closed the box. 10,000? Emma, I can't post this. The girls are going to ask where it's from. I was still kneeling, watching the man I thought I'd marry worry about Instagram likes. That's when something inside me went completely still. And I knew, whatever happened next, this moment had already changed everything. The drive home felt longer than the 3-hour meteor shower trip ever did. Daniel sat in the passenger seat like a stranger who'd borrowed my car. The ring box stayed closed on his lap for maybe 2 minutes before he handed it back to me, like it was something embarrassing, something that shouldn't be seen in daylight. "You're being dramatic," he finally said, as if my silence was the problem. I was just surprised. I kept my eyes on the road. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my chest felt hollow. "Surprised," I repeated, tasting the word like something bitter. "You called it cheap." He sighed, in that practiced way he'd developed over the last 2 years. The way you sigh when you're about to explain reality to someone who doesn't understand how the world works. "Emma, you have to admit it's not what people expect." "There it is." My voice came out quieter than I intended. "What people expect. It's not about them," he insisted too quickly. "It's about image. It's about what it represents. People see your ring and they see your partner's effort. They see what you're worth." I gripped the steering wheel harder, feeling my nails press into the leather. "And what am I worth?" I asked, still staring ahead. "Say it out loud." Daniel hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "I didn't mean it like that," he said finally. "I just mean we could upgrade it. Like, this is a starting point." "A starting point," I echoed, my throat tightening. "A starting point for what?" For other people's approval? He leaned toward me slightly, like he was trying to soften the blow without changing the message. Emma, please, it's not personal. It's just how the world is. Madison's ring was 3 carats. Tiffany's fiancé got her something from a brand people recognize. I can't show up with a ring that looks like what? I snapped, my voice finally cracking. Like it came from love? He flinched, and for a split second I saw something behind his eyes. Maybe shame, maybe annoyance that I wasn't cooperating. I'm just saying, he muttered. You could have gone with something safer. Safer. That word followed me all the way back to my apartment like a shadow. When we pulled into the parking lot, I didn't invite him in. I didn't even look at him. He tried to joke as he unbuckled. We can talk tomorrow when emotions aren't so high. You'll see I'm not rejecting you, Em. I'm rejecting the choice. The choice. The year of saving. The constellation diamonds Clara placed, one by one. The memory of us under the sky. Daniel's finger tracing invisible lines between stars as if he could map our future. He wanted to reject the choice like it wasn't us. I got out of the car. Emma, he called, softer now. Don't do this. I turned then, finally, and I saw him, really saw him. Not the man from the porch 5 years ago. Not the guy who used to say he loved my messy hair after hikes. Not the one who used to get excited over weird vintage jewelry in dusty antique stores. This Daniel was polished, curated, and measured. A man who'd started living like his life was being watched. I didn't do anything, I said quietly. You did. His mouth opened, then closed again, like he couldn't find a line that would play well. He left, and as soon as his car disappeared around the corner, the silence hit me so hard I had to brace myself against my front door. Inside, the apartment looked the same. Same couch, same photos, same framed print of a mountain trail we'd hiked together 2 summers ago, but something felt contaminated, like I could still hear his voice in the corners. This looks cheap. I set the ring box on the kitchen counter like it might explode. Then I sank onto the floor and stared at it for a long time. I didn't cry right away. I kept thinking maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe he's just stressed. Maybe this is fixable. That's what 5 years teaches you. To find explanations. To patch over cracks before anyone notices. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. I love you. I just want us to do this right. Let's talk tomorrow. Maybe we can plan an upgrade timeline. Upgrade timeline. Like my love was a product rollout. I didn't respond. I went to bed with my eyes burning, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed them, I saw his face falling when he opened the box. I heard the word cheap again and again, like a bell you can't unring. By morning, there were more texts, more reasonable messages. I'm not trying to hurt you. You know how important this is, Madison thinks you'll come around once you calm down. We can just exchange it for a diamond. It's not that deep. That last one made my stomach twist. It's not that deep. My year of sacrifice, Clara's work, the constellation pattern, the story behind every detail. Not that deep. I called in sick. Then I did something I hadn't planned to do. I grabbed my keys, put the ring box in my bag, and drove straight to Clara's workshop. It sat behind a row of sleepy shops outside the city, an old brick building with ivy crawling up the side. When I walked in, it smelled like metal, cedar, and coffee. The air felt warmer there, like the place held a different kind of truth. Clara looked up from her workbench the second she saw me. She didn't ask, how did it go? She didn't say, congratulations. She just studied my face for 2 seconds and reached for another mug. Let me guess, she said gently. He wanted something bigger. The way she said it, calm, like she'd heard the same heartbreak in 100 different voices, made my throat tighten. I sat down slowly, like my body had forgotten how to be upright. It wasn't even about bigger, I whispered. It was about being recognized. Clara nodded once, like a doctor confirming a diagnosis. I've been making jewelry for 15 years, she said, and I can usually tell which couples will last by how they talk about the ring. I stared at the workbench, at the tools laid out with care, tiny pliers, stones arranged like secrets. When you came to me, Clara continued, you didn't talk about price tags. You talked about memories, about meaning. You talked about him like he was someone you knew down to the bones. I swallowed hard. I thought I did, I admitted. Clara stood and walked into the small office behind her workshop. When she came back, she was holding a thick envelope. She placed it on the table between us. What's that? I asked, even though my chest already knew something was coming. Clara slid the envelope toward me. Open it. My fingers shook as I peeled it open. Inside was my money. All of it. $10,000. And a folded note, written in neat, firm handwriting. I unfolded it. It said, You just dodged a slow-motion bomb. Go find someone who sees art instead of price tags. This ring deserves someone who understands its value. My vision blurred instantly. Clara watched me quietly, not with pity, more like solidarity, like she'd been where I was standing and survived it. I can't take this, I whispered, pushing the envelope back. You put weeks into this. Months. You made something beautiful. Clara leaned forward slightly. Emma, she said softly, I make art for a living. Sometimes the art doesn't land where it's supposed to the first time. I blinked hard, trying to breathe. But... She lifted a hand gently, stopping me. Here's what I need you to hear, she said. He didn't reject the ring because it wasn't a diamond. He rejected it because it wasn't a trophy. My heart clenched. And that, Clara added, her voice turning sharper with truth, is not a jewelry problem. It was so quiet after she said that I could hear the faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the workshop. I stared at the envelope. $10,000. A year of my life, returned to me like fate was trying to give me a second chance. And sitting there, surrounded by real craftsmanship, real care, real intention, I felt something new rise up through the ache. Not grief, clarity, because I realized something that terrified me. If Daniel couldn't see love when it was placed in his hands, then maybe the ring wasn't the only thing I needed to take back. I didn't take the envelope home right away. I sat in my car outside Clara's workshop for a long time, the engine off, the envelope resting on the passenger seat like it was judging me. $10,000. A year of restraint, of saying no to trips, no to upgrades, no to impulse buys, because I was building something for us. Now it was just mine again. My phone buzzed. Daniel, again. We need to talk like adults. You're spiraling. This isn't you. I laughed out loud at that last one. It startled even me, because he was right in one way. This wasn't the version of me that kept shrinking to fit the frame of his life. This was the version that remembered who she used to be. I started the car and drove, not home, not to him, but downtown, to a place I hadn't stepped into in years, a place Daniel used to roll his eyes at. Premier Sound. It was one of those audio shops that looked intimidating from the outside. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist interior, equipment that cost more than most people's rent. I used to love going in there, asking questions, listening to demo tracks, before Daniel started complaining about wires and speakers cluttering the aesthetic, before I started wearing headphones in my own apartment so he could film content. I parked, stared at the storefront, and felt my hand steady. Sometimes the art finds the right person eventually, Clara had said. I walked in. A man behind the counter looked up and smiled like he already knew why I was there. First time, he asked. First time in a while, I said. 2 hours later, I had designed something just for me. Not flashy, not performative, intentional. Speakers that made music feel alive. A turntable with weight and warmth. Acoustic panels that respected sound instead of hiding it. Vinyl, actual vinyl. Records chosen not for rarity, but for soul. When he told me the total, I didn't flinch. $10,000. The same number Daniel had sneered at. Only this time, no one asked if it would photograph well. That night, I was carefully positioning speakers in my living room, reading manuals like sacred texts when my door opened. Daniel didn't knock. He never knocked anymore. What's all this? He asked, eyes lighting up as he took in the boxes. For a split second, I watched him assume, that this was for him, for us. An apology wrapped in cardboard. Then his face shifted as realization set in. My new sound system, I said calmly. His expression fractured into confusion, then disbelief. You spent money on speakers? He said slowly. Emma, we need to talk about priorities. I didn't stop what I was doing. I adjusted the speaker angle by 1/2 inch. You could have put that toward a proper ring, he continued. Instead, you made an impulsive decision without thinking about our future. I stood up and finally looked at him. I did think about my future, I said. That's why I bought these. He scoffed. Speakers aren't an investment. So is a ring only an investment if other people approve of it? He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. How much did all this cost? He asked, already knowing the answer. The same amount I spent on the ring you called cheap. He stared at me like I'd betrayed him. You're having some kind of breakdown, he said. This isn't rational. I smiled then, not happily, but clearly. No, I said. This is the most rational I've felt in years. I walked over to the counter, picked up the ring box, and held it out. I returned it. The silence that followed felt physical. You what? He whispered. I returned the ring, got my money back. I chose to spend it on something that actually brings me joy. His face hardened. You threw away our future over one conversation. I shook my head. No, I said quietly. I listened to that conversation. That's the difference. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was about to negotiate a deal. Emma, we can fix this. I told you, I was just surprised. We can upgrade. We can design something together, something people recognize. I looked at him then, really looked, and I realized he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to an audience that didn't exist in this room. I didn't want a lifestyle accessory, I said. I wanted a partner. His jaw tightened. And I wanted someone who understood how the world works, he snapped. There it is, I replied. We want different things. He tried the tears next, the softer voice, the 5-year history. I love you, he said. You're overreacting. I thought about Clara's note, about art versus price tags, about how proud I'd been of that ring. I love who you used to be, I said honestly, but I don't recognize who you are now. He stared at the speakers like they'd personally insulted him. This is insane, he muttered. You're choosing music over us. I took a deep breath. I'm choosing myself over a relationship that was slowly erasing me. He didn't have a line prepared for that. He stood there, mouth opening and closing, like he was waiting for applause that never came. When he finally left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frames, I didn't chase him. I turned on the system. Music filled the room, warm, detailed, alive. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was disappearing. Stop! Continue. Part 4. When the mask slips, Daniel didn't text me that night. That should have been my first clue that something was coming. The silence stretched into the next morning, then the afternoon. No apologies, no explanations, just quiet, calculated, strategic quiet, the kind that's meant to make you uncomfortable enough to reach out first. I didn't. I worked from home, music humming softly through the apartment, every note reminding me what it felt like to exist without being managed. That evening, there was a knock, a real one this time. I opened the door to find Daniel standing there, empty-handed, wearing the sweater he used to put on when he wanted to look thoughtful instead of defensive. We need to talk, he said. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, eyes scanning the room like he was seeing it for the first time, not as a backdrop for content, but as a space that belonged to me. He sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees. I've been thinking, he began, about what you said, about growing apart. I stayed standing. I might have let things get out of control, he continued. The Instagram stuff, the pressure, maybe I lost myself a little. For a moment, just a moment, I felt that dangerous pull. The familiar one. The one that says this is where you soften. I miss us, he said quietly, before all the noise. So do I replied, and I meant it. His face brightened slightly, mistaking honesty for surrender. So let's fix it, he said quickly. We can start over. I'll pull back from social media. I'll tell Madison and Tiffany to back off. We'll do things our way again. I tilted my head. Your way before, or your way now? He hesitated. Emma, you know what I mean. No, I said calmly. I don't think you do. He sighed, frustration flickering through the cracks. I'm trying here. I know, I said, but trying isn't the same as understanding. He looked up at me, then explained it to me. I took a breath. When you opened that ring box, I said, you weren't surprised because it wasn't what you wanted. You were disappointed because it wasn't something you could show off, and that told me everything. That's not fair, he said sharply. I was caught off guard. You were revealed, I corrected gently. There's a difference. He stood abruptly, pacing. You're acting like I'm some villain, he snapped. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I was honest about my preferences. And I'm thanking you for that honesty, I said. It showed me who you've become. He stopped pacing. You're really willing to throw away 5 years over this? He asked. Over a ring? I met his eyes. It stopped being about the ring the moment you called it cheap. Silence. Then something shifted. The softness drained from his face. His shoulders straightened. His voice cooled. Madison thinks you're being dramatic, he said casually. She says this is what happens when people get scared of commitment. There it was. The exhale of influence. The borrowed opinion. I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Not sadness. Certainty. Does she? I asked. He frowned. What? I didn't ask what Madison thinks, I said. I asked what you think. He opened his mouth. Closed it. And for the first time in 5 years, Daniel had nothing original to say. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, maybe we rushed the proposal. Maybe we should wait until I'm in a better place financially, or until my platform grows. Then we can do it right. Define right, I said quietly. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for my hand. I pulled it back. That was the moment the mask slipped completely. So that's it, he said, irritation creeping back in. You're just done? I'm done pretending we want the same life, I replied. He scoffed. You're going to regret this. You're letting pride ruin something good. I smiled sadly. No, I said. I let clarity save me. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it instinctively. Madison. I watched his thumb hover, then type. And in that small, ordinary gesture, I saw the future I would have had, filtered through someone else's expectations. I think you should go, I said. He looked up, shocked. You're kicking me out? I'm asking you to respect a boundary, I said. Something you haven't done in a long time. He stared at me like he was waiting for me to crack. I didn't. Finally, he grabbed his jacket. This isn't over, he said at the door. You'll see. I nodded. Maybe. After he left, I locked the door and leaned against it, heart pounding, but not from fear, from relief. Because for the first time, I wasn't negotiating my worth. And I knew, deep down, that Daniel wouldn't let this end quietly. People who lose control rarely do. 3 nights later, I was in the middle of reorganizing my vinyl shelf when the doorbell rang. Not a knock, a doorbell. Sharp, deliberate, performative. I already knew. I opened the door to find Daniel standing there, and just behind him, slightly angled, like backup dancers, waiting for their cue, were Madison and Tiffany. The brunch brigade in full formation. Madison stepped forward without waiting for an invitation. Okay, Emma, we're not here to fight. We're here because this has gone far enough. She brushed past me like she owned the place, heels clicking against the floor as her eyes immediately locked onto my speakers. Tiffany followed, scanning the room with open judgment. Wait, she said, squinting. This is what you bought instead of the ring? Daniel lingered near the door, arms crossed, saying nothing, letting them do the dirty work. Classic. I closed the door calmly and leaned against it. This feels inappropriate. Madison waved a hand. Please. 5 years together gives us a right to be concerned. No, I said evenly. It doesn't. She turned, clearly not used to resistance. Emma, you're being emotional. Daniel is a catch. Do you know how many women would kill to be in your position? Tiffany nodded eagerly. He's building a brand. He has momentum. You don't just walk away from that because of a misunderstanding about jewelry. I laughed softly. That seemed to irritate them more than yelling ever could. A misunderstanding? I repeated. He called something I spent a year creating cheap. Daniel finally spoke. I said it wasn't practical. Madison jumped in immediately. Exactly. He was honest. At least he didn't pretend to like it just to spare your feelings. I'm grateful he didn't, I said. It saved me time. Tiffany frowned. So what? You're going to be alone now? Listening to your expensive music and pretending you're above everyone else? I met her gaze calmly. I'm going to be alone until I meet someone who sees effort instead of price tags. Madison scoffed. That's unrealistic. So is building a relationship around what your friends think, I replied. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Madison turned on him. Tell her. Tell her you're willing to compromise. He nodded quickly. I am. Emma, I told you. We can design something together. Something more balanced. You don't have to throw everything away. I walked over to the shelf, picked up the ring box, and held it in my palm. You want to know what's personal? I asked. They all went quiet. Driving 2 hours to find an artisan who would listen to stories about you. Saving every spare dollar. Staying up late sketching constellation patterns. Because I remembered how your face looked under the stars. That was personal. Daniel's face softened for half a second. Then Madison ruined it. Oh my God, you're romanticizing this, she said. At the end of the day, a ring is a symbol, and symbols need to make sense socially. I nodded slowly. That's the difference between us. Tiffany crossed her arms. So what now? You just erased 5 years? No, I said. I'm honoring them by not continuing something hollow. Daniel stepped forward. You're really choosing speakers over me? I looked at him, truly looked at him. I'm choosing peace over performance. The room went silent. Madison whispered something to Tiffany about commitment issues. Tiffany rolled her eyes. Daniel's expression hardened. Fine, he said sharply, but don't expect me to be waiting around when you realize what you've lost. I smiled faintly. I won't. They left together, heels and ego echoing down the hallway. When the door closed, I didn't cry. I put on a record, something slow, warm, honest, and sat on the floor, surrounded by sound that didn't ask me to be smaller. And I knew, with a clarity that felt almost holy, this chapter was ending exactly the way it needed to. The apartment felt different once they were gone. Not emptier, lighter. No ring lights leaning against the walls. No half-finished content corners. No background anxiety about whether the room looked good enough to exist in. Just space. Real space. The kind that lets you breathe without asking permission. Daniel came back 2 days later to collect his things. We didn't fight. He moved quickly, efficiently, like someone trying not to sit with his own thoughts for too long. Folded clothes, packed shoes, unplugged chargers, 5 years reduced to boxes that didn't even fill the trunk of his car. At the door, he hesitated. "You're really okay with this?" he asked. I nodded. "I am." He searched my face like he expected to find regret hiding there. He didn't. He left his key on the counter without ceremony and walked out without looking back. That night, I cooked dinner for one. Ate it at the table instead of waiting for the perfect angle. Put on music loud enough to feel, not loud enough to prove anything. And for the first time in a long time, I slept through the night. Over the next week, small things kept surprising me. How productive I felt working from home with music playing freely. How my shoulders stopped creeping up toward my ears. How silence no longer felt like punishment. Clara texted me midweek. "Ring safe. Waiting for the right story. No rush." I smiled at my phone longer than necessary. Saturday night, I went to a small vinyl swap meet downtown, something I'd always wanted to do, but never did because Daniel said it wasn't our scene. I met people who talked about music the way Clara talked about jewelry, with reverence, curiosity, joy. No one asked what brand anything was. They asked what it meant to me. On my way home, I realized something that made me laugh out loud in the car. I hadn't lost 5 years. I'd learned from them. Daniel texted once more, a week later. "I still think you'll regret this." I didn't respond, because regret doesn't sound like peace. Now my evenings are quieter, but fuller. My life isn't curated. It's lived. And somewhere, in a workshop surrounded by tools and care and intention, a sapphire ring is waiting for a future that doesn't need to perform. I don't know who I'll fall in love with next, but I know this. The next person who opens a box holding something made with thought, memory, and sacrifice won't ask how it looks online. They'll ask about the story. And until then, I have music, I have clarity, I have myself. And that finally feels like enough.